Hello, everyone, and welcome to the... What was the name of the podcast?
Blatantly Biased
Blatantly
Racing
Biased
Podcast. That's staying in.
See,
That's a fantastic start.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blatantly Biased Racing Podcast. And today, with me, I have Jason Hassett, my partner in crime, and we have a new guest, the Mobile Chicane.
Hello,
So,
hello.
Jason,
Thank you
how
very
are
much for having me. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize.
No, it's,
Sorry.
it's fine.
We have a very eager guest. So, Mobile, how are you?
I've got so many things to talk about.
Yeah, Mobile, introduce yourself first. Everyone already knows me, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the Mobile Chicane. I do a lot of historical-based F1 content over on YouTube, but it's always nice to jump into the modern day and voice some opinions about what's going on now.
And
Cool.
one thing, if you are not able to see his image, it's not our fault, it's his.
Yes.
So,
For,
Jason,
for
how
a
are you, by
variety
the
of
way?
political and religious reasons, he can't show his face.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm good.
okay, if only we could do it like one of those sort of like, if I just ratted out the mob or something, we could just do like a dark outline of my shadow and a really distorted voice. If you could do that in post, that's absolutely fine.
I mean, I don't think that would be an issue to do in post.
Yeah.
I'll do it like one of those Crime Watch documentaries, you know?
Exactly, that's what I'm looking for, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm good. I'm looking forward to a podcast because we have some news to talk about. So,
Yeah, finally.
yeah. This season hasn't been at all strange between WhatsApp
everything's
and
been
drivers.
so dull. Nothing new, no surprises.
No.
Talking about
yeah.
lack of surprises, I mean, something that was so expected. I mean, after last week, it was expected. Let's talk about the great French team, Alpine. Well, they're getting rid of one of their French drivers, Esteban Ocon. So before I give my opinion, because it's going to be a rant, let's start first with Mobile. What do you think? What's your view on the whole thing?
I mean, it was, compared to sort of all the other news that's been breaking, not just in the F1 paddock. I mean, obviously Hamilton Ferrari will be the highlight. But also the day we're recording was the same day that Marquez has gone to Ducati and Martin's gone to Aprilia in the MotoGP paddock. So in the whole scheme of things, it was, I think I saw it this morning, went, oh, and then so I kind of moved on with my day because I think it was kind of cresting on the horizon for a while now. I think maybe the only kind of surprising aspect of it is the fact that it's not been followed up with, and now he's off to X, Y, and Z. I think that's more uncommon. It does seem that they've just kind of thrown it out there to put a line under the thing. You know, I think it was something that a lot of people were anticipating coming, and especially with kind of the rumblings of what we heard after Monaco as well. So, yeah, unsurprising news really. But yeah, I mean, we'll tackle kind of the whole of Alpine in a short moment, I'm sure.
Yeah. Jason?
I mean, look, I know how you feel about Ocon, as in you're a fan, so I have to say he's a terrible driver and it's probably not a loss anyway. No, I think this was just bound to happen. Ocon and Gasly, we talked about this in the last podcast. It's like, as soon as they announced Gasly was going to Alpine, everybody outside of Alpine were like, this is not going to end well because Alpine has currently got a bad management team anyway, or at least the management team is falling apart. So if any team is going to be able to handle this situation badly, it's going to be Alpine. And everyone knew there would be some sort of fire up between those two drivers. It would go poorly. And it seems like I said, everyone knew except Alpine. I think... I don't know, like, I think it is unfortunate once again because it is a situation where Ocon doesn't seem to get on with teammates, but as we talked about last time as well, there is situations where his teammates also bear some of the blame for that. I just wonder where he's going to end up now. That's going to be the big question. But it is just another plot in the path to Alpine completely falling apart. I think maybe Renault knew this was going to happen, and that's why they took their brand off it and put their secondary brand on it, kind of in the opposite of what they did back with Benetton, where they were like, let's leave the Benetton brand on there for a while until we're doing something decent. But it's kind of gone the opposite way this time.
I think the biggest, at least in my view, if you look at Renault and its trajectory, Renault Alpine, whatever we can call it, 2019, Daniel Ricciardo joins the team. By 2020, Daniel Ricciardo is gone and is replaced by Fernando Alonso. So you had a driver lineup of Ricciardo and Ocon. Ricciardo was the better driver and he left. Then you had Alonso and Ocon. Alonso left. And then just as you know, as an add-on gift, we had Oscar Piastri also pretty much giving the biggest fuck you possible to any team, and he did that and he left. After that, right now, at least in my view, even in terms of recent form, Ocon has been the better driver. I think it's 6-2 or something in races and qualifying. And what has been quite obvious, even in terms of team radio, he's been the one. I mean, there's one that is doing the rounds on Twitter right now where they compare the team radio of Ocon after Bahrain and Gasly after Bahrain, where Gasly didn't really say much after either the qualifying elimination or after the race, while Ocon was like, we can do this, we can get better. There were a lot of words of encouragement, and I think David Coulthard also talked about how this is something that you actually look for in a driver, at least in this particular situation. So while all these things are working, one big issue, and I think this is something that almost everyone is starting to unravel, is that even pre-Monaco, it was clear that Ocon was not going to stay with the team. And that possibly hurt Bruno Famine's ego and Alpine's ego. I mean, their ego is bigger than the points that they get, but that's a different story.
They were trying to be the French Ferrari.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of that, they might be. But the problem is they wanted to get him out, and this was probably the best possible way to do it. While the most sensible thing should have been putting all their eggs in the Ocon Gasly basket, because they are the two best drivers available right now. Unless they're securing Carlos Sainz, this is the best possible lineup that they could get. And what they've done is they've chucked out one driver who was probably driving better compared to the two. And right now what they've sent out as a message is this team, it probably runs on a whim. There's really no thought, no concept, nothing. And such a team is not going to succeed. I don't really see anything coming forward. There's actually one thing.
I was just going to say,
Yeah,
isn't it
go
really
ahead.
funny that nobody thinks Sainz will go there, even though it's a works team? Like, isn't that
Yeah.
just hilarious? That
Well,
it's
it's
like,
the fact that Casual just said it, and both me and you just shook our heads in
Yeah.
unison. Like, there was no, we were just going, no, that's
No.
absolutely.
Not
I mean,
happening.
I want to play devil's advocate briefly, because we'll get into some Alpine bashing. We'll set aside a good 45 minutes for that. But just to view it from the other perspective and be objective about the whole situation, I think I agree with what Casual was saying in that I think Ocon has been the better driver this year. I think across the whole careers, I think it's fairly nip and tuck as to who I'd maybe
equal.
rank
I mean,
ahead.
I don't think really, there isn't much of a difference.
No, definitely not. I think in this instance, I think one thing we don't always consider is that within Formula One, it's not necessarily just about kind of the performance on track a lot of the time. There's so much behind the scenes that, is a factor into place for that. Obviously, there are things like there's money involved, which is why Lance Stroll is still around. There are things like having the right personality is around, which is why you could argue Daniel Ricciardo is still kind of clinging around as well. So
He's firing shots.
there's other things into, there's other things that could kind of set into play whether that person is the right driver for your team. And obviously, there's been a lot of stories about how much of a team player he is or isn't, and how well he gets on with his teammates. Obviously, that's going to have a huge impact on any kind of scenario you're in. A quote I always bring up, I think it was in David Coulthard's autobiography, where he sort of says, if you've got a Formula One car and it is 99.9% perfect, that's still about 200 things that could go wrong with it.
yeah.
And I guess you kind of then have to bring that same kind of perspective into running a team. And again, we'll touch on to how many things might not be running right within that Alpine operation. But if someone's up there looking at it and saying, right, there's this one figure here where actually it's not working behind the scenes and not doing the things we need to, regardless of what's happening on track and how often they're out qualifying and outscoring and all this sort of stuff, is whether they've looked at that and seen that and said that's not the right fit for what we want. If we need
Possibly.
a more positive mindset or whatever it is, I don't know, Esteban. I don't.
Yeah.
I think, especially we live in this day and age where Drive to Survive, social media, all this stuff, we're so used to seeing and uncovering all that kind of drama and learning everything that's going on. I think this is a situation where we don't, and we're not going to
Don't
see
really know much. Yeah.
all that's going to happen.
Yeah. Right. Sorry, we cut into your rant, by the way, as well. That's what I was.
No, we'll get to it later. I mean, I think I agree with you.
Okay, cool.
I mean, yeah. I mean, just adding on to it, I think that would have been a very justified thing if Ocon was interested in staying with the team. I think he's made up his mind. The rumors are that he's going to either Haas or Sauber. These are the two options. Sauber, Audi, whatever. Stake. The team led by Andreas Seidel. That's
That
where
one,
he's
yeah.
ideally going.
Yeah.
So I think, and I think I can understand that, because what he's seen, I think any sensible person, I think even Gasly will be looking at possible moves away from Alpine. He's also his contract also ends, right? And I think that's a sensible move for any driver. And the problem with Ocon was that his moves or the conversations that he's had, they've been a bit more vocal as compared to Gasly, who's been maybe a bit in the shadows. And maybe that has also triggered the move from Alpine, because they knew at least one of these drivers is going. So why not take the plunge first, rather than letting them do the whole thing?
Yeah, that makes sense, kind of, to just go, right, look, one of these drivers is going. Ocon's already been pretty vocal about his issues, so let's just put our faith in Gasly and try and retain at least one of these guys. I think that makes sense, because they're going to have a serious problem getting drivers now, I think, because, like, there's a couple of drivers maybe that would go there, ones who basically don't have an F1 seat, but I'm trying to think of anyone on the F1 grid who would think about this as a good decision unless they're literally losing a seat and have nowhere else to go. Because if you look at it, like, again, just being obvious from an outside perspective, Fernando Alonso had no faith and left the team. Daniel Ricciardo had no faith and left the team. Oscar Piastri wasn't even on the grid and had no faith and left the team. At a time when Alpine and McLaren weren't, like, Alpine was kind of there or thereabouts with McLaren, or ahead
They
of
were
McLaren.
nipping on the heels of
They were
McLaren
ahead.
for sure,
Yeah.
certainly in constructors' points anyway.
Yeah, so like, he looks at that and goes, no faith, I'm out of here. You know, like, you've got to look this goddamn bubble thing with my camera.
Yeah.
Anyway, you've got to look at that from an outside perspective and think, well, obviously this is a sinking ship. Like, why am I going to board the Titanic as it goes down? You know, I'm not Stockton Rush. So, like, I just don't think it's a good decision for any current F1 driver. So I can only see Mick Schumacher, Jack Doohan, Victor Martins, maybe. They're really the only options.
Pushmani.
Maybe.
I mean, if the whole thing ends up having an Indian on the F1 grid in a works team, I'm fine with it. Perfect. Maybe for once in
French and
his
Indian.
godforsaken life, Bruno Famin might be doing something good. I don't know. But I doubt that's going to happen.
I just can't see. I can't. Like, someone said Yuki Tsunoda today, and I'm like, I want Yuki Tsunoda to leave the RB family, because he's clearly not getting. He's clearly not going to get that upgrade to the big team. I think we've known that for a while now, for a couple of years probably. Yeah. But if he goes to Alpine, I feel like that's the end of Tsunoda's career at the moment, because he'll go there, wail about, maybe be beaten by Gasly, who's already kind of ingrained himself in the team, and then he's just like, all right, he's not as good as Gasly, get him out of here. That's that.
Yeah, and that could happen.
I saw a couple of people sort of touting names like Lawson on Twitter and things like that as well. Again,
but Lawson,
it just
I
makes
think,
no
lost to
sense
Doohan, right? And that's also because Lawson was Sargent's teammate, and I think Doohan was in Virtuosi or something in Formula 2, and they were all neck and neck. But Lawson was, I think, in his second or third season, but Doohan was in his rookie season. So Doohan is a good prospect. He's not an Oscar Piastri. The problem with the whole thing is you're putting a rookie in a team that is, let's be fair, it's the Matt Harmon left, Doug De Beer left, We've also had another, I think, the head of operations or someone who just recently left, I think a week back, because again, Bruno Farmin had to take his anger out on someone, so had to blame someone else, and another guy just left. Now Ocon is left, who is actually part of the whole developing thing. Maybe David Sanchez is coming, I think. So that is a good thing. But you don't really have a team that is an attractive option for anyone. And I don't really see the whole point of...
There's no cohesive argument for that team. Like there's like, for example, with Sauber, when you think about Sainz going to Sauber, it's a massive drop off and a massive risk. But the upside is potentially Audi could get the engine right, get the aero right, and Audi has succeeded in every other motorsport it's gone into.
Yeah.
If you look at Aston Martin, right now they're having this up and down where they're bringing downgrades instead of upgrades, but it will be the Honda Works team in 2026, and they haven't got their wind tunnel online yet. They've just moved into their new facilities. You can see it go up. Haas,
potential is
I'm
there.
not going to talk about them. They're useless. But Alpine, just, there's no point where I'm looking at Alpine going, okay, I can kind of see where this leads.
I think the heights of shame or the depths of shame, whatever we can call it, is drivers talking to Haas and leaving a works team.
If you're in a works team and then you're talking to Haas and you see that as a step up.
Yeah.
Like, Haas have been better this year, don't get me wrong, but like,
is that not the worst thing anyone's ever said about the French? And people have said bad things about the French.
Oh God. And I think I was since I also write for Sportskeeda, I compiled a list of top 10 key personnel that have left Renault in this recent since they came back in 2016. They've lost Fred Vasseur, the man who has built Ferrari and actually is going to possibly take it to a championship winning team. They've lost Alain Prost. Cyril Abiteboul, I think he was a bit of a political junkie himself, so maybe not that big a loss. Daniel Ricciardo, Fernando Alonso, Oscar Piastri, we talked about it. Esteban Ocon, Otmar Zafnar, the man who was actually, again, he's not rated highly, but in Force India he did a lot of impressive things. I mean, they were P4 twice, best of the rest, and they had no money. Honestly, Vijay Mallya had no money. How he was running that team, no one will ever know. Then they also got rid of Alain Permain, the man who was with the team when Alonso won. And then I think last season or the year before that, they got rid of Nick Fry, the man who has actually won with Ferrari and McLaren. So the team has had talent. It's not like the talent has not come, but every talent has come to the team and they've realized that it's shit show. There's no point staying with this team and just take your oars out and leave.
So, Mobile, do you think they're going to sell, or do you think they're going to come up with a new 5-year plan once again? Because I'm in two minds.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, because I was literally just on my mind. I was going to jump in with that as well, because I think I texted my dad the news this morning about Ocon. He went, "Oh, do you reckon Andretti will buy them then?" And I was thinking, I hope so, but for some reason Alpine do seem to have this steadfast, no, we're not interested in selling. We're going to keep moving forward with whatever this plan is. But again, if we jump back to when we were saying,
ground, honestly,
yeah, well, that's what it seems to be, because like we said, there was a time when they and McLaren were in and around each other, around that 4th, 5th place in constructors. McLaren have only shot upwards, and Alpine have absolutely rocketed to the bottom. So whatever this plan is, I don't know what it is. It currently seems to be a hiring and firing thing, which is, I don't know, it seems like they're in this mindset of this isn't working, so we'll chuck someone else in for 3 months. And when, funnily enough, that doesn't immediately start churning out results, it's almost indicative of like, the whole thing is kind of indicative of like when Jaguar were in Formula One, and they had that same kind of hiring and firing process.
But they still put in a lot of money, Renault does not.
No, and I suppose that's the other thing as well. And I think, to jump back to then when we sort of both immediately dismissed Carlos Sainz as an option there, I think I've wavered a lot of time about whether him going to Audi is going to happen or not, because I think for a long time it was kind of like, yes, it's a project to move forward to, but it is essentially signing away 3 years minimum of not winning a race again, maybe not even being on the podium. But money speaks enormous volumes in this kind of sport. There was a quote I read recently. I think it was from Kenny Roberts or Barry Sheen or something like that, where he's sort of saying essentially, if you have a world championship trophy and 10 cents to your name, you can't buy a coffee.
Mm-hmm.
It's all well and good being at the forefront of the sport, but if you're not getting paid enough for it and then to live your life afterwards as well, it's not going to mean anything. I think that big paycheck that Sauber are going to be waving in front of Sainz is going to make a difference eventually. And it's Alpine, you do question their commitment because of this whole in and out kind of process, and also the whole history of that company is kind of rooted in that uncertainty as well. Renault have been in the sport since the 70s, but it's never been a consistent run. It's always been in and out, either as a works outfit or as an engine supplier or something like that, and it always seems to disappear at a moment's notice as well. It was never kind of like, oh, we'll drop out in a couple of years. It was, you'd reach the end of the year and we're gone and we're not going to come back for another 5-10 years. This kind of involvement that they've had here has probably been one of the longest streaks that they've had for a while, obviously since 2016 as a works outfit, and they were supplying engines for a long time before that as well. But I don't see what their plan is, and so then it does baffle me as to thinking why they're not, when there is a ready-made outfit like an Andretti so ready to go, and I think that we all know is willing to put so much heart and soul into that kind of effort. Then you compare that to an Alpine which almost seems disinterested in a way, or certainly panicking around what to do.
Yep.
It's kind of painful.
I said this last year when the Andretti thing happened, that Formula One is making a kind of historical mistake once again, because you've got a couple of teams on the grid who could easily disappear at a moment's notice. Alpine being one of them. Haas being another. Like, look, I think Gene Haas and Stewart just sold they're closing down their NASCAR
closing
team.
the NASCAR operation.
So, Gene Haas doesn't want to put any more money in, and at the moment they're making more money kind of than they're putting in anyway, so they're okay. Yeah. All it takes is a quick recession, which, given how weird the economy's been since COVID, where we're like, oh no, everything's fine. We shut the world down for a year or two, but it's fine. It's fine. We'll just print more. It's fine. I'm just waiting for a moment where we could just dip into recession. Those teams could be gone. And that is when you want an Andretti in and a McLaren in, teams who are based on F1 and on racing.
Racing teams, ideally.
Yes, exactly. Because it's all well and good bringing in manufacturers, but as we saw in 2008, 2009, when the world topples upside down, those manufacturers are like, right, F1's not important anymore. We got to get out of here. And I'm concerned that F1 has set itself up for a situation where that happens, and Andretti might be like, okay, well, we'll come in, but now we'll call the terms, you know, and now it's a completely different situation.
Actually, one reason behind, again, one of the major reasons why Alpine is not willing to sell is, well, finances. The team is worth $1 billion right now.
Yeah.
It's worth $1 billion now.
And
1.2 billions involved. Or something. Sorry?
And Deadpool's involved.
Not only Deadpool, Anthony Joshua and a couple of other sports persons. So the thing is, a lot of it is, I mean, that's the winning formula, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the main reasons I think it will not be sold, because until and unless its value plunges, there's no point to selling it, because what's going to happen is in the next couple of years or 3, F1 is still going to gain a bit more popularity, and when it does that, when the sport grows, the valuation grows as well, and that's how it's been going. When that is happening, why will they sell the team? And that's why Haas has not sold the team as well.
It's kind of business 101 though. You don't wait until the dip to sell. You know,
yeah, possibly. But the thing is, when you see the growth, I mean, the growth is not going anywhere, at least for the next couple of years or 3. You don't see one of the major reasons why F1...
Sorry, I will let you continue. I'm just saying the concern there is you're riding that wave. You're at a big point in the wave right now, right? The moment that wave starts to dip, selling what is currently a backmarker troubled team is going to be very difficult. More difficult than selling a Haas that has a setup where you can run it on a shoestring. You know, Alpine, you're not going to be able to. So I don't know if I'd agree that it's the right move. It's probably what Alpine will do. It'll be very French, but I don't think it's the right move.
Well, it's the wrong decision to make, so it's absolutely what they will be doing.
Yeah.
Eloquently put.
So you can expect that. And I think, again, talking about Alpine revival, switching gears, there's been a lot of reports about Flavio Briatore actually coming back. Now I personally hate that piece of shit, but still, the man has pedigree. He won in 1994, 95 with Benetton, in 2005 and 6 with Alonso. So again, like for Ferrari to win, the Italian team to win, they bring in a French guy. For the French team to win, they bring in an Italian. Is there... What's your take on it, by the way? Do you think it makes a difference having him on?
It's very indicative of this. There was this, I don't know how much you guys follow other sports, but there was a trend in sort of English football fairly recently where all these clubs seem to be bringing back kind of old players as managers to almost kind of like revitalize and try and ingest, come some kind of excitement in the sport again. So it seems such a weird choice to cycle back to your ex in an attempt to kind of go, oh, maybe this guy will figure out, what's kind of gone wrong. Never mind the fact that he's not worked in the sport for coming up to 20 years now. I'm sure he'll definitely, have all the answers and know how to sort of kind of solve this kind of stuff. The Formula One moves so quickly within a year anyway. I'm not saying that Flavio has not kept his, ear to the ground and doesn't know what's going on, but the same kind of, I want to say expertise. It's not necessarily the word I want to use about Flavio Briatore, but that kind of insight that he could offer, because he does come from a championship and race-winning pedigree, is not going to be, the same kind of thing. So I don't know. It seems again almost kind of like when they had Deadpool and Anthony Joshua kind of joining on. It would be good for a headline or two, but then apart from that, I don't see what it's going to accomplish really.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing though. I was double checking because I couldn't remember, but Flavio Briatore currently manages Fernando Alonso and Mick Schumacher. So I mean, we could bring an Alonso.
He manages Mick Schumacher.
I don't think that's correct anymore. I thought Toto Wolff managed Schumacher these days. But according to the internet, he manages Mick Schumacher as well. But yeah, he could bring a Schumacher Alonso lineup to Alpine. No, look, I think that's not going to happen. But no, look,
basically putting a lipstick on a pig. I mean, it does nothing.
Which, I mean, no, look, I don't think it would be a good idea to bring Flavio in. As much as I love Flavio more than I hate the fact that he was on Epstein's Island, the thing is, I think that Flavio is probably not a great person in terms of both morally speaking and management-wise for the team to bring in. But to put it this way, as an F1 fan, if the ship is sinking, I think we should light it on fire as well for pure entertainment value. Like, it would be amazing to have him in. Imagine him in the press conferences, the entertainment value would be amazing. Like, essentially, everyone currently talks about F1 cheating and so on, or at least have for the last 10 years. You bring back a guy who actually did cheat. You know, it'd be amazing. I think they should do it just purely. I mean, Alpine's already a terrible team. Why not at least make it entertaining?
I mean, I think, Go ahead.
I was going to say, we could get Flavio back in, and then we get the Andretti merger or the buyout, and Pat Simmons is working there now, so we get Briatore and Simmons back together. Yeah, those two know how to orchestrate a race win together.
100%.
I don't know what Nelson Piquet's up to these days, but we could probably drag him in.
Yeah.
I mean, I think can all come together.
Yeah.
I mean, Alonso will be more than happy for number 33. Yeah. He's been talking about it since last season. So
that would be
not?
The perfect excuse. They could bring back Benetton. They're still around.
Yeah.
You know, ideal.
Yeah. I mean, they also have deep coffers, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, Briatore knows how to get cash in, so that's not going to be an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, with his mafia connections. I think it's ideal. Light the ship on fire.
They should do that, ideally. I mean, even if we leave the jokes aside, I think if they are actually doing something like this, it shows some level of intent, some level of positivity.
It shows that they fired everyone else in the world, and now they're having to go back to Flavio Briatore.
It's essentially like the USA at the moment, not to get into politics, but it's basically like, all right, look, we have the option between Biden and Trump, so which one do you want here? Oh, Christ. That's basically where Alpine is right now. It's like, do you want Bruno Famin or do you want Flavio Briatore? And you're just like, oh, God damn it. Like, surely there's another option here somewhere. But there isn't. So
that's the whole thing. The problem with Renault continues to be the cluelessness. And I think, this is where you see Audi actually being a more hopeful option, because what they did in the beginning was they brought in the guy who actually knows how to win. Andres Seidel is a brilliant person actually to have at the helm. And he will bring the right people in. He already brought James Key, and James Key was crucial for McLaren's revival from where they were when Alonso left, where it was a complete shit show. And that will take the team forward, at least for now. The problem with Alpine is they brought in David Sanchez, a man who was rejected. Basically was discarded by Ferrari that they don't need him. And McLaren, I mean, all due respect to David, he has worked in Ferrari, done a decent job. It wasn't anything bad, but it wasn't anything excellent. And he wasn't someone who was pretty much sought after like an Enrico Cardale is. That's the guy that they've signed. There's nothing. I don't see anything happening. And for 2026, I won't be surprised if Alpine is the slowest team on the grid.
I mean, you're not taking
100%.
into account, though, that, David Sanchez comes with his own Ryman loyalty card, and he's been at Woking photocopying stuff. So, I mean, they could have a Ferrari next year.
Could be. They could have the Ferrari next year. Wait, how did Woking get to Ferrari? You took a big leap there.
You're not taking McLaren, Spygate,
Woking,
Photoshopping.
Okay.
Photoshopping?
Yeah, they could.
Photocopying shop.
No, they photoshopped it.
They photoshopped it, yeah. Living in the Photoshopping cup. Well,
yeah. I mean, when it comes to Alpine, I don't think they can even pull that off. So
no,
there's a bigger doubt on that front. And anyways, moving on from Alpine, there's a lot of Alpine today.
Yeah.
This weekend, we have the Canadian Grand Prix. And I mean, for me, when I started watching it, I started in 2005. This race was a pain in the ass for me because it's way too late for my time. It's around 10:30, 11 p.m. And usually by that time, since my dad was a tough taskmaster, he wouldn't really let me watch it on television. And there used to always be this thing where he will go to sleep and then I'll just sneak in and just watch on telly. But recently, I think the races have been amazing on that track. So just to begin with, which is your favorite Monaco, not Monaco, Canadian GP of all time? First, Mobile.
I love Canada. It is genuinely my favourite track, my favourite race on the Canada. I do not have it to hand here, but my partner bought me a little kind of model of the Montreal track, which sits on my little bookcase with all my Formula 1 books and stuff like that as well. So I love... there's been so much kind of chaos there in the past. You've got the Wall of Champions. It's a beautiful circuit as well. I was very lucky. Back in 2006, I was in Canada for a holiday, and you can drive onto the circuit. You can literally just turn off the motorway and be on the circuit and drive around it. So my dad and I did a few laps around there, and it was, it was such a brilliant kind of memory for me. So it sort of has that extra special place for me. But again, it's always had this birth of so many kind of first wins as well. You've got LAC, Hamilton, Kubica, Ricciardo, just to name a few. So it always has produced, quite exciting racing or exciting moments for me. So it's so hard to pick out one specific moment. I think I'm remembering Hamilton's first win was always going to be quite an exciting one. I was definitely much more of a Hamilton fanboy when he first kind of arrived in the sport. It was kind of set the whole kind of nation in hysteria.
You'd love us
in terms of feel-good stuff, I don't think you could ignore Kubica in 2008.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly, the year after having that horrific crash. Yes, there were all kind of shenanigans around safety cars and pit lanes and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
But even, retrospectively, given, what he could and should have achieved, having that kind of one moment on top of the podium is really quite a special memory, I think.
I think for me, it's got to be 2011 like just stands out as just one of the most
Oh, yes.
ridiculous races ever.
Absolutely,
I,
yeah.
I think there's some crazy stat is like most overtakes for the win or something. Like it's
That sounds correct.
Yeah.
Most pit stops, most overtakes. Also, I think it
Longest
was
race ever, was it? With all
Think-
the red
yes,
flags?
the longest.
That
race
was
ever.
the
Because
race
when they
That
introduced-
race changed
Yes.
the whole regulations.
that
Yeah.
brought in the
And
timer.
I remember, I think I slept at I think I slept at 3 a.m. and I had to literally keep the whole thing on mute so that my dad doesn't wake up because he would have been, what the hell are you doing at this time?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean the race was, I think there were a lot of shenanigans in that race. You had I think Button punted off both Lewis and Alonso in that race, if I'm
Yeah,
not
I
wrong.
believe so. If I
Yeah,
remember
they clashed
correctly.
on the straight, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
pit straight.
Yeah. Yeah, with Lewis, and for Alonso, I think he was just left hanging on that particular curb just after, I think, the first few sequence of corners. So, plus, I mean, yeah, of course, there's no... I think there was one thing that icked me a bit in 2011 was Michael missing the podium on the second last lap to Weber. He was, I think, P4, I think he finished. And again, that was a great race for him. I think for me, the 2012 race stands out a bit because of the kind of chaos that it had. out of the blue, you had Kimi finishing on the podium. First of all, the first half, I think the first half of the race had Lewis, Alonso and Seb. They were going back and forth and they were battling for the win. But I think Lewis went for a 4-stopper or something like this, while the other two went for a 3-stopper. And then the last phase of the race had Lewis pretty much coasting through. And then you had Perez and I think it was Kimi or it was Grosjean, one of the two that actually made their way through the field, and they finished on the podium. And then you had Sergio Perez also getting a podium, and that was no one could see that coming. And I mean, just true to how 2012 was, which it was basically a gift that kept on giving in every race.
Yeah.
And I think Lewis was the seventh different winner of that season.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, that race stands out for me. For the whole, I mean, you couldn't expect what was going on. So yeah, for me, that is the one.
It's an amazing circuit. Like it's kind of got everything on it, which is just great. It's one of those circuits that kind of, it's a street track technically, but you kind of get everything on it, which is amazing. It's not quite a Monaco in terms of street tracks, but
I mean,
I'm
we
really
should
looking
get rid
forward
of
to it.
Monaco.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a really good race because I think the last 3 or 4 Red Bull have had some issues, and this feels like the type of track where they could have issues once again.
Well, if you look at kind of where they've struggled so far, in terms of not won anyway, it has been Albert Park, Miami, Monaco. And again, we know we're saying this is street circuit, not quite street circuit. But if you anticipate those same kind of issues again, it does feel like McLaren and Ferrari are going to be up at the front again. Mm-hmm. And the difference between here and Monaco is that there is actually going to be a chance for some overtaking and some more strategy to kind of play out, and potentially some inevitable chaos as and when some kind of clashes occur, because there's plenty of moments and opportunities for that to happen as well. So I wouldn't rule out Max necessarily. I don't think he's going to have the best car, but I think he is good enough that he can kind of overcome that barrier in this kind of situation.
Yeah, I think what's great now is that both Ferrari and McLaren have clearly gotten on top of the new upgrades and setups and everything. Everything seems to be running smoothly for them. And McLaren at Monaco weren't supposed to be going well, but they still did a pretty good job at that track. Mm-hmm. Ferrari obviously, came good at that track. And I think what I'm excited about now for the rest of the season is I think Red Bull still technically have the fastest car by the looks of it, at most circuits. But what's nice about this is it's like any small mess up running into qualifying or the race, any tiny issue, and McLaren and Ferrari are right there on them. And it's not like last year where you needed a Singapore level fuck up to catch up. Mm-hmm. It's literally any small issue. And they talked about this weekend, like even the curbs is going to cause them some issue for suspension, like that tiny amount of an
that's the
issue.
big thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's I don't know, there's some person that shared it on Twitter that the lap from Leclerc and Max, there was one key difference. Max could not ride the curbs. Mm-hmm. He just could not, while Ferrari was just jumping over it and ideally gained a lot of time doing that. Now, Canada has a few of them. There basically is this, the second sector has a few, but it's not an entirely, you can say, a curbs dominated track, which Monaco was. So again, all three teams will have their advantages. I think maybe tire wear could play a role. Engine grunt could play a role. And top speed is something where I think Ferrari is surprisingly struggling this time around. So, there are so many things. What's going to happen is, and I think that's the best part of Formula 1 right now, all three teams have their certain little strengths on different parts of the track. And then ultimately it will culminate into probably a 10th or a 10th and a half gap between the top three. And that's F1 at its best. I don't think it gets better than this.
That's where the drivers... That's where the drivers can make the difference. That's that perfect window. And like we said on the last podcast, it is just perfect that Nui even called this out. He was like, look, we're starting to hit that ceiling. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but he was basically like, look, when we're bringing upgrades, even big ones now, it's going to be for marginal results. Whereas the other teams are basically filling that big gap now and catching us. So I just think we're at that point where we kind of expected these regs to get to because they're more prescriptive. So
precisely. And I have a feeling that things might start heating up now, because Leclerc is catching Max. He's 31 points behind, and if one way or the other Max wins this weekend, even in the best case scenario, if Leclerc wins this weekend and Max is maybe second in the best case scenario, even then the gap is less than 25 points, which is a race win. That is going to really, really spice things up, because at that point in time, Red Bull will be under pressure, and Max is someone who does not hold back if the car is not good enough. That might increase the pressure, maybe increase tensions, and already there have been a lot of talk about Max leaving for Mercedes. This is possibly the best time in Canada and the next race in Barcelona, Bahrain. If these two races don't go Red Bull's way, we are looking at a title battle for sure.
Yeah.
It will really spice things up.
I think the interesting stat I saw was that, so at the same point in time in 2022, when we thought we were going to get that Leclerc-Verstappen battle, I think the eighth race was Azerbaijan, and Leclerc had his engine failure. There was about a 38-point gap between the two of them, and that's when we kind of went, okay, this is starting to widen, it's going the wrong way. Now we're at the same point in time here, we've got that 31-point gap. Leclerc is doing really, really well this season. It's definitely been under the radar a little bit before Monaco, but it's been something I've been touting since the start. He's not finished outside of the top four all year, so he's got a real consistency to his game at the moment. I'm so hesitant to say, yes, we've got a title fight in our hand, because we've been burnt so much within the last few years over that kind of Verstappen dominance. But you're right. And I think Max has got this happy kind of go-lucky attitude at the moment, where he was genuinely happy when Norris won, when Leclerc won, and you could see he really sincerely was happy for those guys to get those wins. If that starts happening on a more regular occasion and he's not able to take the fight to them, that's not going to last any longer, and it's the seriousness of it is going to happen. So yeah, I think you're right, Casual. I think these next two races are going to be very crucial to us seeing what kind of story and narrative we're going to get for the rest of the season, because if Max is beaten on these occasions either once or twice, then the whole kind of dynamic is going to change around.
Yeah. The constructors fight is on, right? 100%.
Oh, constructors fight is massive.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Constructor, I think I can actually say that maybe Ferrari and McLaren could end up, I mean, depending on who develops the car better, they might end up beating Red Bull, because Checo, pardon your Mexican allegiance. Yeah. But I mean, he's been rubbish. Why? I mean, there's no point even talking about it.
They need to drop him.
Yeah.
It's like, even as a Perez fan, I think he needs to go. It's 4 seasons now of him literally at this point in the year. Well, think 21, 22, 23. This is the 4th season now where he'll drop off mid-season, and then he comes back later on. They're like, look, we didn't make the wrong decision. He's back, and you're like, yes, but he was back last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, and I love Perez. He was incredible in the midfield. He's had some incredible moments at Red Bull, but I warned of this last year. I was like, they probably shouldn't renew Perez, because as soon as we get a close fight in any sense of the matter, Perez, like Bottas, whether people on Twitter want to admit it or not, will let the team down. So Bottas was lucky because Perez also let the team down that year in 21. But yeah, anyway, the constructors fight, I think
the best part
is over.
Yeah, I think the best part is going to be, because somewhere down the line right now we are at a situation where I think, again, there's something that we didn't touch on. Red Bull is compromised right now. Red Bull is not the same team that it was in 2023, where every part of the whole machine was actually working towards something. Right now you have Marco, who's pretty much gone off the radar and is talking complete bullshit. And he said it quite a few times that we are winning because of Max. And I think at some point it's nice to say that, but when it starts becoming a theme, it's a bit like you're putting team below the driver, and that's something you should not do. Something Mercedes never learned, and look at where they are right now. Somewhere, I think coming back to the whole thing, if the next two races are not perfect or Max is not winning either of them, wheels will start falling in place. And I think that's where probably we are looking at either Max turning on his own team, which he kind of did in Singapore last season and the year before that, or we might see maybe the team coming together and then Max starts just pulling away. Something is going to happen in the next two races, I have a feeling.
It does have that, again, jumping back to when we were talking about Alpine before, that whole kind of 99.9% everything working right. There is enough kind of cracks starting to form there with the all the kind of drama kind of going on behind the scenes there, where you can start having legitimate questions about what's going to move forward. You know, if you think, rewind to 12 months previously, the thought of Max Verstappen leaving Red Bull would have been an absolute nonsense. And I think as the years kind of go on, I don't think he will, but the fact that there is enough doubt and enough kind of cohesive reasoning to suggest and make cases for why he may want to move on, that's absolutely huge, because they were meant to be building this big kind of dynasty there, which would be...
I mean, it's there already.
What I mean is that I've said this in other places as well, but the case for Max Verstappen and Red Bull is quite an unusual one, because it's very rare that you have a driver start winning races and then titles and then being comfortable with that. I can't think of certainly off the top of my head, of any other situation in F1 history where a driver has started winning titles and then gone, cool, let's just keep churning these out. You know, Schumacher went from Benetton to Ferrari, Hamilton went from McLaren to Mercedes, Prost, Senna, whoever you want to kind of name it, they all had to move on and look at something else, because you need that challenge. You know, it was partly because they need to keep motivating themselves, and partly because they want to prove to other people it's not just because of the car and what was built here, it's down to me and the talent that I've got. And so it was so rare to see that Max kind of settle in there and be happy to keep churning out win after win without any kind of indication of, yes, there was obviously like interest from Ferrari and Mercedes in the past, but it never really came to anything. But now, like I say, the cracks are starting to form around that, and we might be heading to that point in time where, you know, 2026 is coming up, and I don't know how huge it's going to shake up the kind of that grid order, but it's going to be something playing on his mind. And considering where that next best move is going to be, does he stick or does he twist, basically?
I think that they're in an unfortunate position as well, because I actually don't think any of the on-track stuff has anything to do with any of the off-track stuff at the moment. Like, obviously, you immediately got people being like, "Oh, look, Newey left and they're falling apart," and it's like that. It's not really how this works, you know. It doesn't happen that quickly. And also, it was Vache and Balbo who have been doing the kind of day to day anyway. And Newey was very much the guy in charge of the direction and the concept. So this direction would have been set by Newey a long time ago. So, you know, that's obviously not the case. I am concerned that you're going to have this kind of bumping of the two things, where you'll have some small internal issues start crippling to the pressure of like this external monologue, external chatter, basically, because you've obviously got Jos that absolute moron that he is. I don't like Jos Verstappen. You've got Jos obviously saying stuff where he literally is like, I told you this team was going to fall apart, which I said was analogous to someone going, I told you that house would burn down after pouring kerosene on it. Like it's just bound to happen. And Helmut Marko kind of doing similar things because I think he knows at some point his days are numbered there. So he's either just having the banter with it or just pissed off.
He's just butthurt. I think he knows he's already in. I mean, at his age, he might be hurt in a lot of places, but the point is that at such an age, he knows his days are numbered.
Yeah.
And what he's trying to do right now is just either screw with Christian by trying to find a way to get Max to move from this team, because I've read a lot of his interviews at OE24, at the Austrian outlet, and every time when it comes to Max's future, he's been very cagey. Every time that question comes up, he's been so cagey, and you just see that there's something going on. And maybe it's both Jos and Marko in Max's ear, and they make it happen. But this is where actually, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, this is the problem, though, isn't it? Because you've got a situation now where even Nui talked about, and as we've just talked about, where the diminishing returns are setting in, right? So the teams are getting closer, and that's going to happen in these regulations. And now what it looks like from an external point of view, and this is the pressure I'm worried about, is basically Nui's going to start being less and less around. The operating window for that car, it's not like the operating window is closing. It's that the operating window to get that car to be at its peak performance is going to be less and less because Ferrari and McLaren are closer. It's not that the performance window is closed. It's just that to be at that particular speed, this is your window now. So you're going to have more and more of those issues. And the external noise is going to be more and more, well, obviously Vache and Balbo aren't doing the job. That's going to have that pressure. You're going to have, Jos and stuff putting pressure from the inside that's going to go, oh, well, Horner can't keep the team together. And then you have all of this mounting in the press on top of the fact that they're not winning races every weekend. And I think we've seen with Red Bull, and we've seen it with tons of teams in the past, that all leads up to this regulation change where if anything goes wrong in 2026 now, all of that pressure combines into just this explosion of, right, we need to rebuild the team. And I think Horner did a really good job last time of keeping the team together when that happened. I don't think that's the case. Well, it's obviously not the case this time. Nui's already left, for example. And then you get a Mercedes situation where this once great team falls apart and it's going to take years to come back if it does. That would be my concern if you're a Red Bull fan. Luckily, I'm not. I'm a Perez fan, and even I admit he's not good enough. So
It does have the feel of a workplace where all it's going to take is one man taking another man's lunchbox from the fridge, and that's just going to set off this whole explosion of events.
There's a lot of tension, and you can see, there's a lot of poking from Jos whenever he speaks to the media, a lot of poking from Marko whenever he speaks, and of course the F1 insider that basically Marko supplies news with. And again, they came out with something that Max is starting to rethink his decision to move to Mercedes. And I think actually that is one thing I wanted to talk about. George Russell has come out and kind of echoed what Karun Chandok said, where he said that Max can easily take the 2026 season off. He can assess how the entire pecking order is. And then in 2027, he pretty much signs up with any of those top teams that's available and then take it from there. I think we've had a discussion on this a bit. I think Jason and I did. Mobile, what's your view on the whole thing? Do you think he will do something like this? Take an year off? Maybe do Le Mans or something?
There's coulds and shoulds. I mean, Max Verstappen could celebrate winning a race by taking a shit in his helmet. It's not going to happen. So...
Never say never.
Something is... never say never. I mean, I'll be more of a Max Verstappen fan
if it's an FIA helmet as well.
Exactly. I mean, I understand the logic behind it. It's just perfectly sound reasoning because, like you say, everyone would be lining up and more than happy to welcome him into the fold. And that may well be, that may be that challenge that he wants to do. Maybe it's not winning a title with another team, but it's maybe going away for a year.
Yeah.
genuinely enjoy, because it's no known secret that he loves his racing. The fact that he's doing iRacing at the same weekend that he's at a Grand Prix. He's spoken in the past that he wants to do Le Mans and sports cars, and he wants to do it with his dad, which I think is quite a touching sentiment in a way, regardless of what you think of Jos. They clearly have a good bond together, and I think that's a nice story to have for sure. Yeah, I would be very surprised if it happens. Yeah, I don't think he's moving away from Red Bull. And I can't see him taking. I mean, I didn't think Hamilton was going to go to Ferrari, and here we are all these months later. So anything could kind of happen in this silly season that we're having at the moment. But I'd be very surprised to see it.
I can't see it being Mercedes either. Like, surely he's got to look at Mercedes at the moment and be like, I need to see if these guys get their aero division together. And also, he will know that a ton of the staff from HPP went to Red Bull, which means they probably went to other places as well. I'm sure he's got to look at that and think, I don't know if that's my best option, like, at the moment. You know, maybe he takes Hamilton's seat at Ferrari for 2026 just to wind up F1 Twitter. But, like, the other problem I see with that as well is, surely if he goes to Mercedes, George has got to leave, right? Like, we talked about this before, Casual. Like, surely George has to be already a little bit annoyed that you brought me in to be the future of the team when Hamilton leaves. Now Hamilton leaves, and you're going, we need Verstappen. You know, surely he's got to be a little bit...
Kimi Antonelli, or a teenager.
Or anybody, yeah. Like, surely he's got to be a little bit frustrated that he's like, look, I came in when you fell apart. I haven't complained. Hamilton is now left, and now you're shouting that you need this big superstar to replace Hamilton. And it's like another reason why I don't think Carlos Sainz is going there to play second fiddle for a year either.
No. If anyone's going there, it's to be a seat warmer, I think.
Ocon.
All the indications
year,
of
right?
that Antonelli will be going there. It's just a question of when and not if.
Yeah.
I'm of the mindset that they might as well. Like, if they've got this other year before the regulations come in, it's a fairly safe seat to be adjudicating someone's talent, because Mercedes are at a level where they don't need to be concerned, or certainly don't be concerned whether Antonelli is going for wins and podiums, because they're not at that level. But equally, they have enough of a gap back to that lower midfield where he can kind of safely circulate into the points pretty much every weekend and complete the learning that way. So that makes the most sense for me. And again, it's, you know, a fantastic story, and I understand some people's reservations around it being such a young age, but you've got to kind of sink or swim in this. You know, Max was that age. Fernando was only 19 when he jumped in. I know these are ifs and buts, and there are plenty of other examples from history where people had too much too soon. But I think he's going to get that right nurturing environment about it. It's not going to be a case of throw him in for a year, and if it doesn't immediately work out, get thrown back out again.
Yeah.
You know, he would be given the time to develop there and put something together. Going back to Russell, I feel like I saw in the news that he kind of welcomes Verstappen if he did come in. I think part of his personality would like to take on that challenge, because if Max does come into quote unquote his team and he then starts beating him there, that's a huge rise in kind of his stock there. And he clearly backs himself enough that, you know, he thinks he can be a world champion. So he's more than happy to go toe to toe with someone who is possibly the best driver on the grid.
That probably plays into Russell's general demeanour as well, actually. That he's just that type. Yeah. He's the type of guy who would enjoy that. Crikey. But yeah. I just think it looks bad from an outside perspective. You're like, oh, come on, what are you doing, guys? Like,
of course.
I think at this point in time, what perception I'm getting is George is probably going to be Ricciardo Part 2, where Ricciardo jumped in when, not in terms of popularity, but in terms of when Ricciardo jumped into Red Bull had their slump. That's similar to what happened to George. Then he beat Vettel left. He was replaced by a teenage sensation in Max Verstappen. And something similar is going to happen here, because
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that is a ironically similar story. Ironic's not the right word, but anyway.
Yeah. It's the same basically, but the thing is he'll beat Lewis probably 2-1 in terms of seasons. I think so. That's going to happen. I hope, Mobile, you don't mind. You're not part of the cult LH. And then Kimi Antonelli comes in, and honestly, whatever I've seen of Kimi, I've been impressed. I have some doubts in terms of his evolution. I've not seen the kind of evolution which I saw from Max in his Formula 3 season, the one season that he had, where he was raw in the first 4 or 5 races, but just like this, you just saw that talent that tends to shine through with these kind of with these kind of drivers. I haven't seen that with Kimi yet, especially in terms of wheel to wheel battles. I don't see that Leclerc level of eagerness or ruthlessness or a Verstappen level that we used to see. So maybe I have a bit of reservations in terms of that. But again, if he is that good and he jumps into a Mercedes, by the time Mercedes is good enough, he might end up beating.
So we're talking
Russell
20,
probably just repeat
2030, are we? Mercedes won't be back in 2026. I guarantee you they will not be back in 2026.
I had the same thought, but what has happened in Monaco, where the car was actually good, Imola the car looked better, and after Imola, I think it was the first time that Allison came and said that we actually what we expected actually happened on track. It's a very rare thing with Mercedes in the last 3 seasons. So maybe they are finally getting on terms with things.
Yeah, sure, but I don't know. Like, there's not anything that tells.
I can understand. Yeah,
it's because, like, the last time, not to ignite any TMLH fans watching, but the last time was down to the engine. Like, I think that's a pretty agreed upon point, that they never had the strongest aero team. They were always kind of the second or third best aero team, right? I'm not saying they had
I disagree.
I'm not saying they had a bad aero team. I just mean it was never out and out the strongest. That was always Red Bull, at points Ferrari. You know, they had a great aero team, just not the best. The engine was that differentiating factor, right? So going into 2026, the engine's not going to be this. We've talked about this. I don't think it's going to be as big a differentiating factor as everyone seems to be thinking it's going to be. Like, a lot of people who are touting Mercedes for 2026 are thinking they're going to kill it with the engine. It's like, one, they've lost a lot of staff, so they might not. But two, I also don't think the gap between the best engine and the worst engine is going to be anywhere near as big as it was in 2014. And then on top of that, you've got more complex aero regulations than we have at the moment. And it's taken Mercedes a long time to just go, oh, what we saw in the wind tunnel is now working on the track. Well, that probably should have been there a lot sooner. I mean, like,
3 years earlier.
Aston is having the same struggles, to a point where people were like, I wonder if it's the Mercedes wind tunnel. It's like, no, it's just Aston need to sort some stuff out. But Aston, coming from where they are, you kind of expect that. Mercedes shouldn't be having these issues. So I think they're going to be 4th or 5th best in 2026. Personally, I know that's and I wouldn't in 2021.
I agree, that's the best place for Kimi Antonelli. You know, if for a young driver, if it's a 4th or 5th best car, he can easily just bed into the whole system, race a bit with the top drivers, and then when it's time, just with Max, he ultimately takes over. That could happen. Mobile, what do you think about the whole power unit thing? What's your view?
I think the counter argument to that is that, I think obviously Mercedes, that was a big kind of component about why they, it's well documented, they had the best engine. It's as simple as that. I think the difference you've got between then and now is, in 2014, you've got Mercedes, you've got Ferrari, and you had Renault or Tag Heuer or whatever you wanted to call it at the time. But it was those three. Going into 2026, we've got the 4 current manufacturers. We're getting Audi in there as well. We're getting Ford in there as well. We could potentially have Cadillac in there as well, if that does
FIAC sense.
F1 grew a conscience.
So there is a huge capacity there for the engine to make another big difference there, because now you're running through an order of potentially 7 different manufacturers.
Yep.
And if you're the best one, that's going to make a huge difference whether you're aligned with the 7th best one. So I think that there's definitely a potential for that to come into play, because there's going to be so many people all trying to get the upper hand, all looking for the right loopholes and the best way that they can kind of jump through all the hoops to make the best thing possible.
Yeah, could be possibly. I think and that's actually a very interesting thing, because we honestly don't know. Because I tried to DM Karun Chandok because I wanted the clarification on this thing, because he was quite vocal on Twitter about how the power unit could play a role. And I actually asked that, because since we are basically changing the 30% of the component, how big of a change are we really looking at? Because Mercedes in 2014, that was a rocket ship. That the power unit that they had a major jump over almost everyone
If you
else.
remember how they developed that, though, that's kind of the point where I'm like, that's why I don't see there being this huge gap, is because Mercedes literally built 3 different power units before the regulations were finalized. They were prepared no matter what route it went down. So they were so far ahead that they had the split turbo. They had the perfect MGUH, basically. Like all these things. And most of those complexities don't exist in this regulation set. And also the teams have been working on these engines for a longer time as well. So it's not, I don't know if it's a longer time overall. I'm just saying the regulations were finalized a lot earlier, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe. I just, the other thing I kind of see is that like the V6 is basically saying the same, except it's going to fully sustainable fuel, right? So that's not going to be a huge differentiator because they kind of already know how to run that. All the teams have, bar maybe Renault, have kind of converged on the V6. And then you've got an electrical power unit again, where in terms of EV power, there's not a huge amount you can kind of play around with there because you've got a strict set of the power output from that. So I'm sure, like Mobile said, they'll find loopholes, and these are F1 teams, they're the best of the best, and Renault. And then they'll find things that they can add to this. But I just, personally, I don't see there being a massive... I think it's going to be like it is right now, where you've got this kind of like maybe 3 to 4 tenths of a second over a lap, which is huge.
Over a lap.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to be like this. One team gets it right and they're like a second off down the road, after the first lap. And I think between that gap, you'll have 1 or 2 teams that are kind of 4 tenths down, and the rest of them are kind of within a tenth of each other from the engine. That's how I see it playing out. But again, these are complex regulations.
It's too tough to. Yeah,
I'm
happy
guesses.
to agree with that. I don't think it's going to be like you say when Mercedes got it right and they were comfortably top because they got it right. I think the 2026, just because you've got the best engine does not mean you're going to be top of the pile. But I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see what that trickle down effect is between who is getting it absolutely right and who is not figured out at all.
Yeah. Renault.
Basically,
Renault.
And actually just bringing this back to this weekend, Mercedes, where do you think they've actually end up in the whole scheme of things this weekend? Because Lewis has been on the podium in the Canadian Grand Prix in the last 3 occasions. Do you think there is even a shot of that happening? As far as I remember, there is no weather, there's no rain or anything like that, no disruptions on that front.
I can find out.
Mobile?
I think you've kind of got that the top 5 in a way is almost kind of in a little bit of a lockdown, and currently in terms of you've got Max and then you've got the 2 Ferraris and the 2 McLarens, and you expect all of them to be in and around that kind of conversation for the podium. Maybe Sergio, if this is one of his bounce back stronger weekends as well. So what you're trying to find is that the gap for Mercedes to slot in amongst potentially 6 places there, and or hope for misfortune for 4 of those potentially as well, which in this current day and age you're not really going to get that in reliability stakes. So it's hoping that something like the Wall of Champions is going to claim lots and lots of victims, or we get some sort of chaos at that first corner, which is definitely a possibility. But yeah, unfortunately, Hamilton does have a good track record in Canada, but unfortunately, just because you have an affinity for a circuit does not immediately kind of equal success. Sadly, if it was an equal machinery, then absolutely it'd be making a difference. But he's got, like I say, at least 3 other teams in front of him, and then it depends what's going on with, other teams kind of getting into that mix as well, whether Aston Martin can find an upgrade rather than a downgrade, like you said, Jason, or what the V carbs are kind of doing this weekend as well, because Sonoda's been so much stronger recently as well. So it requires them to make the right step forwards and to be able to translate that practice performance, which we've seen so much recently, where they've been up at the top of the timesheets and then they do something or they change something or they don't change something, whatever it is, and then they tumble back down the order by the time it comes to qualifying. So it's whether, like you say, they can mimic what they did in Imola to do it what they anticipate it to do. But we've not seen them do that this year, so it's hard to say confidently that this is going to be the time that they get it right.
Yeah, I think if it was just down to drivers, this would be one track where I'd be predicting Hamilton on the podium. but obviously it's not just down to drivers. It's F1. What I'm most interested to see at Mercedes this weekend, because I don't think unless something crazy happens that they're on for a podium, that top three is just too tight. So even if Perez and Sainz and Piastri have a bad weekend, you've still got the other three that are likely to be on the podium. Obviously, we're going to see Piastri if he's learned more from tyres after Monaco, because that's like his one issue, for example. Yeah. But yeah, what's going to be interesting with Mercedes for me is obviously Lewis didn't get the wing at Monaco because Mercedes is biased against him and there's a massive controversy there. It's not that he turned it down. Sorry, I love F1 Twitter. It's so funny. But yeah, what's going to be interesting is that wing apparently pushes the front end a bit more towards what Hamilton likes. And obviously it's been kind of, I think it's been 7-1, right, in qualifying, Russell versus Hamilton
something
this
silly
year.
like that, yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if that front wing kind of helps Hamilton get a bit more comfortable in a car that he clearly hasn't been that comfortable in over one lap at least. So it'll be interesting to see if that makes a difference. Over the races, he's been pretty good anyway. So I think at the end of the day, the one thing you can say about Mercedes pretty confidently is whatever points are on offer for that car's pace, the two of them will get those points. It just depends which order the two of them get the points in, and that's really it. They've been kind of maximizing the car. Yeah, but podium, no, I don't think so.
Agree. Okay, so now let's get to the most interesting bit. Predictions.
More interesting than Flavio at Alpine? I don't think so.
Yeah, can we go back to Flavio Alpine, guys? I don't think we spent enough time on it.
I just heard a rumour that Flavio is going to be driving in Ocon's car this weekend. Anyway.
His fat ass is going to... by the way, there was also this rumour that Flavio... Who does he manage? He manages Fernando
Alonso and Schumacher. Yeah.
Which driver did Alonso last had a beef with? Esteban Ocon. And Esteban Ocon is out and Flavio is in. So maybe that also happened.
Perfect.
I mean, who knows? Anyways, coming to the predictions bit, your top three, Mobile. By the way, we are always wrong.
I think we were right about it. In which case, I'll go as outlandish as possible then. Let's have. Let's say, given that Canada's got a good track record for first wins, let's say Piastri to win. Let's give him that, and then we'll put Max in second, and then because one outlandish prediction is not enough, I'm going to say someone from that. We're going to have an unexpected third place. I think I'm going to go for a Sonoda or a Stroll or something like that. I think.
Yeah.
I have no basis on this other than happy memories of chaotic Canada races. But for the sake of if I'm going to get it wrong anyway, I might as well get it really wrong.
Yeah.
Jason? So I think that Ferrari are going to pull a Ferrari, which means they just had a great weekend, so they're going to now have a terrible weekend. So I don't think Ferrari's going to be on the podium. I'm just concerned about their straight line speed, and I don't know. Yeah, anyway, I think they could struggle against the Red Bulls and the McLarens this weekend. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say it's Norris and Max fighting for P1 and P2. I'm going to, just for the sake of being wrong, put Norris in P1 and Max in P2. And then I'm going to use, my new fanboy spinner. I'm going to use that to pick P3 because I'm going to be wrong anyway. So let me do that right now.
Have you got a fanboy spinner, Jason?
Yeah, have you seen this? I just created.
You didn't mention it at all on Twitter, so it's just
I think I posted it everywhere on Twitter because I was having so much fun with it. So in P3 is going to be it says Leclerc. I can't do that. Sorry, Leclerc. Because I've just said Ferrari. It's going to be Guan Yu Zhou.
I knew it.
Oh wow!
So my top three are Norris, followed by Max, followed by Guan Yu Zhou, which can only mean one thing: 18 DNFs.
It's going to be fun. Yes. Oh god. Yeah. So in my view, I think I'm going with the Leclerc win, just because I want the championship to spice up. Lando Norris second, Oscar Piastri third, Max DNF.
Ooh.
Because if that happens, we're going to have so much fun.
Yeah.
That's what I.
Speaking of fun, did I tell you about my fanboy? Sorry, go on. Anyway.
Okay, a nice one. By the way, we've actually we've gone through all the things. Well, first of all, Mobile, thanks for being here. We'll have you on a few more times as well. I mean, stick around. I hope it wasn't boring or anything like that.
It's been so much fun. I've really enjoyed it.
That's been good, yeah.
Yeah. Same here.
Next time we'll do it without casual. It'll be more fun, but anyway.
Oh, it's going to be so nice, won't it?
Yeah.
Be able to get a word in edgeways.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Europeans pretty much pushing out the Indian.
Yep.
Racist bastards.
Happy election day.
Yeah. Oh God. Don't remind me.
Welcome to authoritarianism. Okay. Colonialism's back, baby. Yeah. Anyway.
Anyways, let's cut that point out.
No.
Okay. By the way, thanks guys. Thanks for watching. We guys had a lot of fun. I hope you guys did as well. By the way, do one thing. Subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button. Drop a comment. Anything. Other than I love Lewis. Other than that, drop anything.
No comment. I love Lewis.
We appreciate it.
Exclusively, I love Lewis.
Yes.
No comments on the podcast.
And also, it doesn't matter which Lewis. Could be any Lewis.
Yeah.
John Lewis.
Do that. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Did I plug my fanboy? Bye, everyone.